that they're not being a man, they don't know who they are, but they're looking at the negative side of things and they're not actually standing up and taking full responsibility.
Hello and welcome to Share.Care's What is Manly radio show and podcast. Men feel more lonely, lost, and not useful in society than ever in history. Males are not attaching to school, work, or women. What it means to be a man appears lost. Is there a framework for being manly that we can unearth?
Welcome to Share.Care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.Care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.Care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello, Paul. How are you going?
Yeah, good day, Damien, yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing really well actually now because interviewing with you, it's nice to have someone in the same country and I'm not up in the middle of the night doing a recording.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's same time zone even. So yeah, that's pretty special.
It is, and it's awesome. And we've both got wonderful weather today too. The sun's out where we both are. You're in Queensland, a bit warmer. And I'm down here in Victoria, which we can change very quickly as far as the weather goes. But
Yeah,
a little bit cool. The sun's out. But for the audience, who I have is Paul Wrightson. Now, Paul is the founder of Live Fully Now, The Complete Man, and Yoga Anywhere. He guides and supports men and women to break down barriers and past beliefs and connects them to their true self to live their ultimate life. Now, Paul has helped over 400 men to live life with purpose and pleasure. So you're appealing to the key demographic that we have here for the What is Manly podcast. If we start more broadly, because there's a lot out there in the news about men being lost, lonely, not feeling they have a place in society, not feeling they have a purpose in society. What have you seen in that regard?
Yeah, very true. There's a huge trend in that going that way, and is that way. Like it's not just in Australia, but globally. I mean, yeah, the biggest issue is that they are feeling lost. We are feeling lost. So whether there's the multiple factors in that, and we'll dive deep into that a little bit further, I'm sure, as we go along. But yeah, definitely there is that feeling of lack of direction, lack of purpose, lack of self. Who am I? Why am I even here? All of that is definitely a massive issue globally.
Where do you think that started? I mean, what caused that to start? Where do you think it started? Yeah.
I think with definitely the pressures of social media and the pressures of society that put on men. So the biggest, what I'm finding, I guess, in the coaching that I do, with men, like it's confusing, wearing all the different hats. 1 minute I'm this, 1 minute of that. Supposed to be the breadwinner, supposed to be the tough guy. All of that is definitely the opposite of what a strong, true man is, or what manly is. Shutting things down, trying to do it all alone, all that sort of stuff. Then it's confusing once we start opening up, to have that balance on, the feminine, the masculine side balance as well.
Yeah, so you're talking about the pressures in society, pressures from social media in particular. What sort of pressures do you think that creates?
Self, false reality, I guess. So, social media, for example, if you're looking at, other people or role models, I guess, that you might see on the social media sort of realm, what their sort of life is. They don't show the bad side; they always show the good side. So if we go into self-comparison to that particular person or whatever, then can definitely have a negative impact on the individual if they're seeing someone always like positive, sharing positive messages out there. And yeah, I mean, my upbringing, I guess it's being in Australia, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate, was quite, to be a manly or a true man was like to, have that tough sort of macho personality and characteristics. Not show the emotion, do it all alone. Almost it's just putting up this barrier of like everything's okay, but internally, there's always things in there that can be improved or potentially not feeling okay at all.
Where do you think that come from, this whole doing it all alone? Because if you look at, if you go back in history, well back, when we had tribes, to survive, you had to work as a community. You had to work as a group. That's why we survived. And from the researchers out there is part of that, of the reason why we are such social beings, is partly because of that, because we needed to be social, we needed to interact so that we could be part of the group, which is, there's strong research that even supports that the giving component is linked to that as well. That's why we get such a reward from giving, because if you helped out the community embraced you, and therefore you wanted to help out more. But if you didn't help out, you kind of got ostracized. So what do you think has caused this whole need to want to, that we have to do it alone?
Good question. I mean, going back to, I'm not sure where in history or the timeline any of that sort of started, but I mean, it's what I'm seeing constantly is that men aren't stepping up and taking responsibility. So they're in this spiral. They feel that they're not being a man. They don't know who they are. But they're looking at the negative side of things, and they're not actually standing up and taking full responsibility. So whether it's somewhere along that line of, if you're leader of a tribe or the village or whatever, going back, hundreds of years, thousands of years, you had that responsibility to actually look after yourself, look after the family, look after the tribe. So whether there's something lost along the line somewhere where there's a big difference between being the leader of a tribe, then going back another step, Carl Jung talks about the archetypes and things like that. So there's the king, the lover, the magician. So you can be a king, but then if you don't have any others, you're not in that balance. So you've got to be the complete man, or having that strong manly characteristics or being. It's having balance across being certain and strong, but also loving and caring for yourself and others as well. So it's like you can go the other way too far. So I mean, you can just steamroll over everyone, but not really connected into them or yourself. And that's where a lot of it is lost, because they think to be a man was going to go gung ho, was going to do all of this, but then you're not really looking at this destruction that's leaving behind. So that's when that whole balance comes into it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I love what you're talking about there, where you talk about taking that responsibility and people not taking that responsibility. Is that, I mean, there's that component of taking responsibility for your action, which is a really key, important point to do in your life. That's what's even though we don't have technically an order of the 10 principles that we have, personal responsibility is listed at the top for that reason. But do you think also too, social media has kind of helped perpetuate that a little bit, because you can get on there and be quite anonymous and throw some hate speech out there, but there's no responsibility to, even if you are known, if you put your name on your profile, still there's not really much consequences to you to put a whole bunch of crap out there. Do you think that's helped perpetuate that a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's quite easy to hide behind the computer or the phone. If you're having real conversations with someone, it's I often think about social media. Would I say that in a one-on-one? If I wouldn't say that to the person one-on-one, or what's the end result? What do I want to get out of it? So if he's thinking, I'm going to get out of it, I'm going to destroy that person or say something negative to them.
Yeah.
What's the point? Why would I do that? So, but it is easy to do that because he can stay anonymous, and that's one of the big issues, I think, because you can verbally abuse someone and you're not taking full responsibility of the end result.
And from that perspective of being manly, I mean, I would say, it would be generally agreed that being personally responsible, taking your responsibility for your actions would be, a manly thing to do. I mean, it's a human thing to do or a personal thing to do. But in the context where we are talking about men, or males, is that, from that perspective, have you seen when the people that you've been working with, have you seen that there's been a lack of that, and have you helped them come to that awareness that personal responsibility is pretty critical?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's whether male or female or whatever gender. I mean, it's quite easy.
We can genderize on this show. It's about being manly, so that's fine.
I mean, it's quite easy to talk about what we don't have and what I should have done and could have done and things like that. I mean, as soon as you turn that around and look at, okay, what can I control right now? What can I take responsibility now and to move forward? That's when major shifts happen. So, definitely the work I do is bringing people aware of that, and it's that self-awareness first. Like, okay, this is where I'm at, this is where I want it to be, and then how are we going to get there, instead of like, this is where I'm at and this is why it's happened, and I'm still living in the past of all the other stuff that's happened, and not forgiving themselves for where they are now, so they can move forward. So awareness and self-forgiveness, so they're definitely up there with the things that help people work through.
Yeah, let's work through those two. I love that, awareness and self-forgiveness. It seems to be that order too, because you really can't forgive yourself for stuff that you're not aware of. How does someone become self-aware that this is? Cause, you talk about, there's a lot of can't think of any people off the top of my head, but there's a lot of quotes out there about having that time, that solitude, self-reflection. How does someone get to that point of going, hey, this is a lot of the troubles I'm experiencing in my life? I'll relay an example. For me, I was helping out at a wedding, and for the long-time listeners, you've heard this story before, but that's okay. I was helping out at a wedding, and there was a spot at the front of the church for the bridal car to pull up. It wasn't marked or anything, and someone's obviously pulled up and gone, "Oh, beauty, parking spot right out front." So they've parked there, and I've stormed over and jumped down the guy's throat, going, "What the hell are you parking here for?" And he's there with his partner. Obviously, he's upset because of that. And he's moved his car, and obviously that's created a bit of a not great relationship between me and him. Not that I ever spoke to him again, but obviously he wasn't wanting to speak to me, no doubt.
Yeah.
And I look at that and go, well, that wasn't a great way to behave, but that was me. I don't beat myself up about it because it was a separation. I would deal with that differently now because of that self-awareness. But some people never go through that awakening. How does someone become self-aware?
Well, they've got to be open to it and curious. So if you're not, curiosity is probably just before that self-awareness. I mean, if you're getting the same, say, positive or negative results, you're doing something over and over again, it's working. So if you're getting positive results, fantastic. Whatever you're doing is working. If you're getting negative results and there's something that's not working. So if you bring the curiosity in, okay, well, now, and the awareness, now I can look at, say it's this classic example, getting the same type of person in relationships. I left that one, the other person's come along, and so it's exactly the same situation I was in 10 years ago. So if they're in that sort of regard, as an example, like it's something's not quite right, and it's having that curiosity and the awareness and the responsibility to have a good hard look at what actually is happening, and then be willing to step up and do the work, because it does take work as well.
Yeah, is that kind of taking it from that approach of looking at it and you're going, well, the same thing's happening over and over again. What's the common factor here? It's me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and And that's way different to that's manly.
Yeah.
Unmanly or not being manly, whatever the word is blaming everyone else.
Yeah.
Using all the excuses, like I've attracted that person in, they're this and the other, whatever that you blame them for, or use all the excuses why the relationship or job or whatever it is that's not working. And that's definitely the complete opposite to what a complete man is or manly is. So,
yeah, that's self-responsibility. Is that easy to do though now? Because and I've heard this talked about, and I think it was Shapiro. Was it Shapiro? I can't remember. I've forgotten his name. He was talking about that in this environment now. As soon as you apologize for something, people then jump down your throat even more. Is that are we in a difficult situation now where we have to be even more defensive? Because if we admit, hey, look, I need to improve something, all of a sudden people will take advantage of that. I had there was a lady on this podcast saying you shouldn't be vulnerable because you're just exposing your belly to people to stab you. Metaphorically speaking, of course, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah. Hadn't heard that one before, but I mean, it's I'm a big believer that if you're super vulnerable, as long as you're opening up to the right to the person you feel safe with as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's numerous people that I've forgiven over the years. Big believer that you've got to forgive to move on. If you hold these grudges, even if it's 20 years ago, just contact the person, find them, and just apologize or not apologize. Sorry, forgive them for that particular moment. I mean, it's just going to lift, the weight off the shoulders. The whole energy changes, and then we can sort of move forward. Then, but being vulnerable, I think it's that's for me. That's what being manly is all about. So being confident in yourself, feeling comfortable with yourself to be able to take away all the barriers and then talk from the heart, deep down emotions and thoughts to someone who's going to create that safe space to be able to share, which is like absolutely critical. That's where like the release, the growth, the the living, I guess, come back to living fully now. Like it's that living. So whether we're male or female, or whatever, we're all human beings. We've all got feelings and thoughts, and being vulnerable is part of it for sure. For me, anyway, that's what I think.
And I love your segue into self-forgiveness. That's awesome. Let's move on to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a massive one. Like how many things do we carry that we've done? Like even from school or childhood or whatever that I wish I'd done it differently, or still beating myself up over that. I mean, it's as humans, we can't move forward. We can't see the light because it's still living in the darkness from the past. So and then that creates if we've got stuff we're carrying through that we haven't forgiven ourselves for, well, that creates lack of self-love, and that's where we do go into the blaming others if things aren't going right, because we haven't got that true connection to us as beings, as individuals, and be able to move forward, just almost like holding a grudge of the dreaded, I wish I've done that or I should have done that type scenario.
What do you think the benefit is for people that do hold on to these things? I mean, in the studies that I've done of human psychology, everything we do is for some sort of perceived benefit. Otherwise, why would we do it? Yeah. What do you think the benefit is that people have for holding on to these sort of things and beating themselves up all the time?
I don't think there's any benefit at all. I mean, it's when we, I guess, it's okay to acknowledge it. These things happen, and what I guess guide men through, like it's actually happened. So it's like it's not something we can just bury our head in the sand and talk about. Wish things are different or whatever. It actually happened. Yeah. So it's like stepping up and being manly, and then being the complete man and just acknowledging it. Okay, it happened. Now I want to move forward. What can I learn from that? If it happens again, what would I do differently? Being that, having that awareness, if it starts to happen again, all of that takes practice, but it's absolutely zero benefit holding on to it. It's just got to acknowledge it, learn from it, and then move on.
Is it really then more about a habit of just that's a behavior that we've learnt to do, and it isn't beneficial to us? And I agree with you, it's not. I don't think I find any benefit in that. Using that example before, I certainly am not beating myself up that was a poor behavior at my at that wedding. It was a poor behavior. Acknowledge it and just don't do it again.
Well, that's it. That's the thing, isn't it? It's acknowledging it, and then if it came up again, well, how would you do it different? So that's the critical bit, I think, which it could happen again. Life changes and life throws its challenges. It's like, how would I do it different if it did happen again?
Yeah, and that's a good question. How would I do it different if it did happen again? And is that part of that awareness? Again, going back to, it seems to be like a circle there, going around and going, okay, I'm aware of that. Now I can forgive myself. How would I do it different? Is that process that people can go through?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
How would they do that?
Sure.
What would they need to do?
There's two types of awareness. So there's the internal awareness, and then there's the external awareness. So internal awareness is how my emotions and thoughts are affecting my body physically and both spiritually and emotionally. Then there's the external. So what are those thoughts and emotions and my actions? How is that affecting those around me, loved ones, friends, whoever's around?
Yeah.
So having that sort of awareness, and then knowing that something's triggering you at the time, it's very difficult. It does take practice. So if there's a trigger in there, there's like almost an instant pause or second before you react to actually, if this is happening again, I'm going to take a split-second break, or 5 minutes, whatever the time might be, whether it's an email, whatever. But then acknowledge it, and this is how I'm going to respond differently. I mean, the issue is that you don't learn from the past one. You can't catch it then, because then you're just in this, you've got the basically, I guess, blindfolded almost, and then you react the same way, and that doesn't serve anyone.
Is that where self-reflection is really important, from that perspective, being able to take that time? Because I do this. Where I record these is down here at the beach house, and I've got this big lawn out the back, and I got rid of the gardener, and I got a self-propelled lawnmower, not one you sit on, but you have to walk behind it, so I get some exercise. And I do what's called gumping. I'm Forrest Gump. I go out there, no music or anything like that. Sometimes I put headphones in, but don't turn them on, just in case someone walks past, because I have a reserve at the back that people go past.
Awesome.
But to have that just time. Sometimes the lawn doesn't even need mowing. I need some space, so I'll go out in there and do it. Is that, do we need that self-reflection time? I know it works for me, but do we need to take that time and just really just have that think about, okay, what happened there? What were the contributors? How did I contribute to that? Is that important?
Super important. Yeah, and I love how you do bring the lawnmower into that as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a man thing, isn't it? You got to get out there and
That's right.
And yes, for those about to type on their thing, women do lawn mowing and tactile things too.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a man show.
Yes. So true. Self-reflection and spending that time is super important. I mean, it's whether it's 5 minutes, an hour, whatever the time is, but it's stepping back, I guess, from the day-to-day, roles we play or whatever it is, work, and having that time to really reflect on, the day, the week, something that's happened, what you can learn from it. If it's, say, a situation or a relationship, whatever, if there is anger there, it's like, okay, well, why am I feeling that way? And then it's really having that time to reflect on why it happened, what I was feeling in that moment. Because if it's too often where you can just go through life experiencing the same thing over and over again, not looking back at what actually happened in negative situations or even positive, and think about how we can do things differently, and we just keep jump on the wheel and keep going, and that's pretty unhealthy way of living. And putting the head in the sand and thinking everything is fine.
Mm.
when it's not.
That
If it's not.
denial, that denial, because it's not a river in Egypt, to quote a
Yeah.
Courtney quote there.
Yeah, that's
I'm a
right.
dad, I
Yeah.
can do my dad jokes.
Yeah, that's right. Excellent.
But that, I mean, does that fall into that when we talk about denial and just that? I mean, that connects to self-responsibility,
Mm.
and just denying that you have any involvement. I mean, how do you become aware of that? Is it just, again, taking that time and going, well, I am a contributing factor here? I remember, and don't you, I mean, I think most people relate to this. You get to a certain age and you start quoting your parents and you go, oh,
That's right.
but
Yeah.
my mum used to say it takes two people to argue. And
Mm.
same sort of thing, if you're having a problem and you have that awareness that it takes two people, well, okay, what part am I playing in this? Is that something for people to reflect on as well, or to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that just led me into something that I do support people with. So
Mm.
your mum is right. There's takes two people. There's also takes one to break the cycle as well. So
Ah,
there's different types of behaviour that we go through as humans, not just men, but men in particular shut down. So if things get too hard, or
yeah.
they're denying something is happening. So there's above the line and below the line behavior. So below the line behavior is victim mentality, blaming,
Mm.
excuses, complaining,
Mm.
going to the cave if things get too hard and pretending nothing's happening, nothing's going wrong, not taking responsibility. All this sort of behavior, thoughts and actions is like below the line and definitely not manly. But as
Mm.
soon as we step up above the line, that's when love, joy, happiness, all the positive emotions
Mm.
comes up. So if we're in a conflict with someone, we're both below the line, and guaranteed it'll just keep happening. And this
Yeah.
is a lot of relationships that are going through different changes in life.
Yeah.
A lot of them are in this negative pattern. They're in this below the line. But if one jumps up above the line, takes full responsibility, and this is where the manly comes into it,
Mm.
and then just knows, and basically just pours love into the other person. It's breaking that cycle and that pattern, and that's that is so critical in any conflict. Whether it's a personal relationship or work or a friend or whatever it might be, family.
Mm. How does that work going from a conflict perspective? And I know I'm having talking, and I'm pretty sure it'd be similar in Queensland, certainly here in Victoria, with the courts, and when we're talking about family violence. And I've talked to the family violence officers that are leading what's happening in the court at the moment, and they certainly have the approach. So they've told me that the men are stronger, and they will, regardless, view it as, if there's a situation there, that there is a greater risk um, in a conflict situation from the man, purely because not a strong, bigger, stronger, generally speaking here.
Yeah,
I know there's some women that are bigger than men, but we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
generally. And so they approach it from that perspective. There's a greater risk, and even now in Victoria, they've mandated, regardless, even if it doesn't, you can go through the process where if someone makes a complaint, you can consent without admissions, which is where more than 90% go to. So you haven't admitted anything happened, and I think it's dealt with that way to so they don't have to go through this whole process of working out who was right or wrong. Unfortunately, some false claims get made too, and people get caught up in that. But what's happened now is that you go through that process, even if you do consent without admissions, you now have to attend a program. I won't call it men's behaviour change program, but it's an awareness program of how to address conflict. So from a man perspective, when we look at that, especially when we look at that strength differential, man had in that, taking in that biological factor, men do have more power. We're bigger, more intimidating, deeper voices. That creates a lot more power. How do we control that? And to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. How do we encourage men to be aware of that in those situations when there is a conflict? Because I look at it, there was a relationship I was in, and the lady said to me, she said, "You're always yelling at me," and I was talking in my normal tone of voice. And I asked some friends, and go, "No, that's your normal tone of voice," but to her, it was very loud and very scary. So I actually went, "Okay," and I lowered learnt to lower the tone of my voice, talk in a calm. I adjusted it calm, which worked well later in my dating career when I was dating, because women go, "Oh, you're so soft," and yeah, so there was an advantage to that. But how do we create, again, it's awareness, but how do we get to that point in dealing in a conflict, to going, okay, being aware of particularly that strength differential?
Yeah, the physical side and emotionally, I mean, there's no excuse for using physical violence to anyone in a relationship or anything really. So, I mean, it's quite sad that, you know, males feel as though they can do that and still doing it, domestic violence. Like, it just amazes me how it gets to that. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, when you're in that, I guess a household, for instance, it's like it should be the safest place in the world to be able to share and experience and you know, open up and things like that. And unfortunately, in a lot of relationships, it's not safe at all.
Yeah.
And to solve conflict, the other person needs to be willing to hear what you have to say, and they need to be willing to express what they're feeling and how they want the situation to change. So if you've got two people and one person wants to resolve it, the other person doesn't, well, it's not going to be resolved because the other person's not open to it. So definitely separating the two people, like getting them out of the situation, especially if it's like anything to do with violence, got to bring the safety into that first. But it's, yeah, the other person just needs to be willing to go down that path. Like when I was, I did a leadership course maybe, 8 years ago, and a lot of the half a day was spent on conflict, whether it's in a relationship or family or work context. And it was, you know, if you're contacting this person constantly going, you know, when are you free to talk? And they're not ready to talk, but you are ready to talk. Well, until they're opening up and they're ready to talk, they're not going to, it's not going to be resolved. So that's the tricky thing about it. And then there's the whole getting into a safe space to talk about it without actually getting emotionally charged. That takes practice as well. And unfortunately, a lot of people do get emotionally charged, especially in close relationships. And it's just coming back to knowing what each person wants and being, you know, comfortable and in that safe space to be able to share without any judgment.
Yeah. That's interesting, that point there, because I wanted to talk about it. And it's obviously different if you're in a longer term relationship, you're already in the relationship, that becomes challenging. If you've got, and it has been conflict there for, you know, hopefully not physical conflict, but there's been communication issues. I'll put it in that term for the purpose of this episode that we're talking about. Because I noticed, you know, from my perspective, there was a certain type that I was attracting, or I was attracted to, I should say. And there was a miscommunications a lot. And then when I decided to do something different, I went, okay, I don't want this anymore. I will do something different in this scenario. But like you said, the other person wasn't interested in resolving it. And it became very clear when I was dating, okay, now when I identified that person, it was just like, well, I don't want that type of relationship, so I would just walk away. Now, obviously, again, if you're in a longer term relationship, that's not an option. There's other things you need to do if you want to try and save the relationship. And that's what I was trying to get to, that point of, you know, from man perspective, being manly, and having that courage to say, okay, this is the boundary I've got, rather than going, okay, I'll accept, you know, being treated like crap. I have a boundary. I'm going to be a gentleman and speak kindly. I'm, you know, putting a framework here. But how do we get men to say, okay, well, there's a boundary from that perspective. If I'm behaving kindly and then if someone is not, then I'm okay to walk away and find someone else who is nice out there, because there's lots of nice women out there.
Yeah, touch on some great points there, for sure. I mean, it's being in a relationship and knowing what you want in the relationship. If there's a long-term relationship, it comes back to, okay, core values and what you value, what I value. Are we still connected? Do we have that emotional and physical attraction and connection? So that's important. If it's like a short-term one, I mean, I should say if it's any relationship, any intimate relationship. It's about if they've said something that's really hurtful or whatever it is. It's just having that ability, and this does take practice again. Instead of like doing the typical thing what males normally do, is like he or she said that, I'm gonna shut down. I'm gonna go for a walk, not coming back 4 hours or whatever. But talking about how it actually felt to receive that, whether it's communication or whatever. So then obviously if the other person wants to continue it, then they're going to realize, okay, well, wow, I didn't realize that had that massive negative impact on you. Thanks for sharing. Or they could respond and and still could keep spiraling out of control. But it's about sharing how it's how you felt in that situation. So if you're in the middle of conflict, having massive arguments, I mean, the biggest thing that I've found in my past relationship, I've been married to my beautiful soulmate now for 13 years, been together for 15. But before, other relationships, I mean, it's lost my train of thought, but it's about having the ability and space to actually share how you're feeling. And that's what I was sort of going off path a bit, but yeah.
No, but that's a good point that you raise about sharing how you're feeling, because I've heard through this podcast and others as well that sometimes men have been ingrained so much not to have feelings that they don't even know what that is. So it becomes difficult for them to, well, they can't share because they don't know. It becomes a whole process. How can someone start to be aware of that or start to learn what their feelings are?
Yeah, that's a huge thing, isn't it? Like, you don't know what the emotions are. You've been shutting them down for so long, and it goes back generations. I mean, it's even to the point where I think once you start having this conversation with someone or even yourself, just knowing where it's feeling in the body. My feeling is my chest tight and my shoulders and head hurt. That generally means say your head or heart and upper bodies like can be potentially anger and frustration. So a lot of men feel that, of course. So therefore they're feeling this tense shoulders and like the whole body is like tensed. So, it's like but if you've got someone or even yourself, just like, okay, and that comes back to the self-reflection again, if yesterday I was super angry, someone said someone to me, it triggered me or whatever, it's like, how was I feeling in the body? Like if you didn't know it was anger, what emotion, was it?
Yeah.
Was it frustration? Was it hurtful? Did it, yeah. And then being able to open up that way, if you don't know really what the emotions are.
Well, that's an interesting point that you raise, and it comes up a lot where we talk about male anger, and there's a lot of research now showing that anger is an expression, as you just highlighted, of different things. It can be depression, it can be frustration, and that's just how it's expressed, which is one. There's a whole element of one being aware of that and going, okay, I'm feeling depressed or sad, and that's being reflected as anger, but it's not really anger. So being aware of that and dealing with that, but so and then. Well, yeah, those two components. One, being aware of it, and two, in dealing it. That's where I was going with that. How do we deal with that? It's great that awareness is coming in society now. That it's not just he's just not this violent. Well, I shouldn't use the word violent. Angry man is because we're not talking about. I'm talking about being angry.
Yeah.
This angry situation is actually a reflection of multiple things, and there's one, the guy itself has a responsibility to work out what that is, but also too, it's something that if you're aware that, okay, well, this is an anger thing, what's going on here, which gives you a whole range. If you think it's just an aggressive act, obviously you're going to get defensive, but if you think, okay, there's a deeper problem here, as someone listening to that gives you a whole different perspective from which to approach it and help address the issue. Do you see that the component on both sides there, and how can people help? Either one, if you're feeling anger, how do you identify what that anger is, and two, if you have a friend who might be saying you see they're angry, being able to talk to them in a way which helps them work out what's going on.
Yep. I mean, again, there's so much in that too. I mean, it's a lot of people that have anger issues don't necessarily find they've got an issue.
Mm.
And that's the tricky thing. They don't think they're doing anything wrong, but it's only the people around them, potentially have been in, say, an intimate relationship. The other person will be saying, well, when I said this, you reacted that way. Fast forward, I think you should get the right support would help you, whatever. But so that comes back to awareness again. So that external awareness, obviously something that I've potentially said to someone and they've given me feedback on how it's affected them, the way I've said it.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to have a good hard look at myself and do the work to find out what actually is happening, because anger just doesn't pop up. There's something, I think you just mentioned it, there's something deep seated within that is causing that massive rush of anger to rise. And it's like getting deep into what is embedded unconsciously or whatever to shift and change that. So if the same situation happens again, it doesn't trigger the anger.
Yeah.
That's a tricky thing. But that's the sort of work that, as men, that's what we potentially help for sure.
Yeah. And that leads to communication. And I mean, there's countless books on communication, countless podcasts and other things. One that stood out for me, I don't know if you've heard of a guy called Mark Gungor. He has a program called Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. And there's a little short on YouTube called Tale of Two Brains. And he talks about how men and women, we have the right intentions, but how we deal with problems is different. And it's commonly known that men deal with problems by going to their cave and he calls it the nothing box, and we don't want to talk about it. Whereas women, when they have a problem, they want to talk about it, which kind of sets us up from the beginning. When you say it that way, we know we kind of stuffed from the start when we talk about it that way. But what he says is that when we have a problem, when we see our partner has a problem, we love them, we want to help them, but we approach it from the perspective of how we would deal with the problem. So when a guy sees, his love of his life, cares about deeply, she's got a problem, and she starts talking about it to him, he's going, well, just quit talking about it. And then we have this issue, and vice versa. When he has a problem, generally guys like to have a bit of time to think about it before talking about it. We're speaking general terms here. I know I do. Absolutely. That's why I do my gumping, because it gives me time to think about it.
Excellent.
And then I'm ready to talk about it. But if she comes in straight away and says, start talking about it, that then creates some conflict and tension. How do we become aware of these situations? How do we deal with that so we can become more aware, more understanding that, hey, maybe the other person deals with things differently and I need to approach this differently?
Yeah. My wife and myself, especially my wife, has taught me this great thing to do. Like in my past relationships, I didn't do this. So get shut down when in the cave or whatever. If she's ready to talk and I'm not, it's sort of like, okay, respect what I'm going to say. I'm not actually ready to go through this yet. I need some space, but then give her a time frame. So the worst thing that I've found in my relationship, if I say I need some space and, 1 month goes past and I haven't actually come back to it, that actually causes like negative emotions and negative connection to between Veronica and myself. But when I say, look, I'm not ready, I just need some space to think about this, I'll come back to you. I need to think about the situation again or whatever else, and then just give her a time frame. Let's talk tonight, or let's talk in the morning. Then that in her mind goes, okay, that's good. He's going to think about it. Make sure you do go back, though. There's nothing worse than you say you're going to come back tomorrow morning and like.
That's being a man. You commit to your word. Exactly. That's what being a man is.
Exactly. So it's like having that, giving my wife the reassurance I am going to go through the process of thinking about it. I'm not ready to hear her side yet. I'm going to have that separated, give them that space, and then come back and have that conversation then. I mean, that's so important than just denying it, head in the sand, let me think about it, walk away, never come back again. The same thing a month later rises, haven't had the discussion, and that's when the spiral happens, like downward. And that's what, having that, obviously rising up and having that conversation, we'll break that cycle.
I love that, what you just described there, because it seems to me there's a lot of pressure out there on men, young boys in particular, to talk now, that we have to, as a woman would do. And that's why I love Mark Gungor as well. It's quite funny, but he does talk about it. He goes, when you read what women want in men, you read and go, they just want another woman. And it's like, we're not wired that way. But I love what you talk about there, that it's sometimes that we need that space to just go and think about it. But like you said, if you need, it's not push it underneath, but what you're doing is you're actually going and having that time yourself to think about it. I do that. I like that, because if I speak straight away, I'm probably going to say something that, is not really right and then fumble it up and make it worse. It's better to just have that time to think about it and process it clearly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but so is that, because it seems to me that there's a lot out there that men just need to open up straight away. But what you're saying is take the time first to think it through, because it sounds like that. Well, for me, that's what's natural to do. And I'm sure it is for a lot of men. Mark Gungor talks about that. There's a lot of people talk that. But then, as you said, set that deadline. Is that space really important for guys to just have that time to think about it and feel safe to be able to think about it?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. As long as we come back to it. The worst thing, in my experience, the worst thing is that we don't come back to it. And that's when, that's the worst that could possibly happen, because it is, turning a blind eye to it. But it's whatever comes naturally. I mean, there's got to be a deadline as well, I think, so the other person knows that you are going to come back to it. If it doesn't come naturally to share straight away, I think then those sort of things definitely take practice, because we're wired different, as you said. So it's creating that space for ourselves to really understand ourselves, why a particular thing happened and how we can do it differently, and coming back and sharing that with a partner. I mean, that's my experience. That just enhances the relationship by 100% every single time. If I share how I can do it different, I know I affected it this way, or get them to explain how whatever I said or did or whatever affected them, and then explain, okay, next time it happens, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I do things differently, and just explain what was going through for me at the time as well. So it's so critical to cause any conflict in relationship, to be able to express that, both parties express, and be in that space to do so. Yeah.
And how important is part of that communication? I love that we're talking about communication. We actually don't do that often, but it's awesome, because I think it's really critical. And again, quoting my mum, communication is really important for a relationship.
Totally.
How important is the component of listening from a guy's perspective, to be really listening and take the time to listen? I know from my perspective, there's times where I want to move on. I just want to move on, but she wants to keep talking. And it's like, okay, hang on a minute. This is important for her. I need to listen. But not only do I need to listen, I need to really, really listen. How important it is that to do that, and to actually take the time, and what are some techniques that we can do to actually make sure we are listening properly?
Yeah, awesome. You touched on that. I mean, it's asking good questions is definitely a good one. I mean, most people want to feel heard. So, if they've got something to express, they want to make sure the other person's listening and actively listening, not just like on their phone and half listening, because that's not really truly listening. So it's
put your phone down would be a good one.
That's right. Chuck the phone away. Any distractions, just give them 100% attention and just listen to them. Ask, questions like open questions. They're not closed questions. How are you feeling then? Why do you think it happened that way? Just keeping the conversation going, and they're going to feel heard for sure. And again, that's just going to make them feel loved, supported, heard, connected. All the beautiful things you want in a relationship. So yeah, definitely take any distractions away. Ask good, open questions, not closed. Like closed are, if anyone needs to know, closed is like the yes and no answers. So open's more like, how are you feeling? Why did they do it that way? Do you think? Why did you do it that way? Whatever it might be, what was happening for you at the time? Just trying to get the conversation going, just so they feel heard. But yeah, put the phone away. That's a big one for sure. Before you do that.
What about feeling like you're being attacked when someone's talking to you? And I've experienced that when I was younger. Someone would be talking to me and I'd feel that they're attacking me or attacking my behavior. So I'd get defensive and start defending. And then obviously you start going down this path. How does someone get into that space where when the person's talking, you can actually, to use to disassociate a little bit and not take it personally, but actually listen with a genuine interest?
If they're attacking you personally, you mean?
Well, if you feel like, because a lot of times that'll happen in a conversation, you might be listening, but they'll be describing something, and maybe it's a self-worth thing. Certainly from my perspective, when I look at it in the past, it's probably where that I felt that going, I didn't have that self-esteem where I went, okay, what they're describing is, using that analogy with the church earlier on, and that was a behavior I did. I see that as a behavior that wasn't me personally. My intention was to look after the bride. My behavior could have done with a lot of better. My behavior could have had a better approach.
Yeah.
So when we're in that listening space, sometimes we can get defensive of what the person is saying. We can feel like it's an attack, even though they're describing what they're going and it might not like, and maybe it's a poor communication on their behalf. But how can we facilitate that conversation better by actually stepping back a little bit and not taking it personally?
Yeah, that's a big one. I was about to say that, not taking it personally. I love a book, The Four Agreements it's called.
Yeah.
And one of the agreements in that talks about not taking things personally. I mean, it's no matter what's going on in someone else's world, most of the time most of the time there's something going on in their world for them to react a certain way or verbalize, whether it's a personal attack or whatever. So that takes practice again. I mean, it's not taking things personally and just asking questions. Why are you speaking that way? Why did you say that? What makes you think that? Just all of that, or just shift it from you taking it personally and feeling the whole brunt of it just into an open conversation. But the Four Agreements, like you mentioned in a book before, for me that was one of the life-changing books I've read. Like, it's just don't take it personally, no matter what's happening, whether it's in a relationship or whatever. There's always a reason the person's reacting that way.
So and is that something from that perspective? If you're reacting a certain way, do you need to have a look at what your reasons are and maybe go, well, if this reaction is not great and not serving the conversation, or serving the situation, maybe I need to have a look at that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as men or humans, but we're talking about men right now.
Exactly. We can be the man's safe space here.
That's right. It's like how I react to something or how you react to something is our control. So if we get angry as a snap moment or we're happy at something that's happened to us, we control that. So we've got the power to control what the outcome is. So whether we react to something, how we react, what our action is towards something, like we've got full control, and that's where the full responsibility comes in. So if I react angrily to something, it's up to me to have a good hard look at myself or whatever it is. If I act positive to something, well, great. Well, I'm doing something right. But I mean, it's all a learning. I mean, we've got to be open to learning as well. And that's if we're not open and willing to change, nothing will change. We'll still get the same results.
Yeah. And what about where role models and mentors fit in society today? Because it seems to be, you go, there's plenty of women's gyms out there. That's okay to do. If there was a man's gym, it would be deemed sexist, and there's a lot of groups like that where they don't exist anymore because of that reason. Have we lost the role model? Because I look at it when I was growing up, I'd go play golf and bowls with my dad when I was roughly around 10, I think I was. And there was a number of places even before that. I'd go with my dad to different areas, even around his work with him, and I'd be around other men. And when playing golf, initially I played a couple of rounds with my dad, and then because we were playing with a social group, it was a social golf club that went to different clubs, then I'd be off with three other guys, spending 4.5 hours walking around 18 holes of a golf course is a lot of time to be with other males. And being young, I was asking questions, so I learned to ask questions, and I was getting good guidance. But it seems to me there's a bit of a lack of role models for guys out, and certainly lack of groups where boys can be part of that. Is that the case? And do we need that? Is it important?
Yeah, super important. Yeah, one of my biggest role models outside my father was my grandfather. So, as kids, we'd go from in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, go up there, spend the weekend or the day or whatever, and it's having that that groundedness and that connection and learning from him as an elder, sort of about life, was so important. And I didn't realize it at the time. I thought I was just having fun, but looking back at that time, that was so precious to have that that space and those learnings from him. So I guess bringing it forward to these days, yes, we've still got the parents and the grandparents, but then there's also our reality is a bit lost too, because there's the connection to the phone. So when kids are getting on their phone on an early age, they go visit their grandparents or go visit whoever who might be a mentor to them in life. Guaranteed, most of them are probably going to be on an iPad or a phone. So there's it's lost that emotional and physical contact and connection, more than contact, connection.
Yeah, so the phone or the content on the phones become the role model now. Is that?
Yeah.
Some of that's probably not that good.
No, and unfortunately, kids and teenagers, because they've access to everything, they're not going through that growth stage emotionally more than anything of the teenage years, because they're going from child to teenage and teenage or probably child straight to adult without that growth and learning through the years, because everything's so accessible.
And how does that relate to listening when we talk about really listening and having conversations? Because you look at, again, social media seems to be more about blurting out your opinion, and as we know, opinions, everyone has one, and they're like assholes and most of them stink. Is it a case of we've lost that listening, and especially from our leaders, when we look at it, even right to the very top of our leaders? Because I think when you originally went back to what debating was about discovering ideas and sharing, but now when you look at debating, and you just have to look at the last US presidential election, or just look at Parliament House in Australia, question time, it's really a couple of narcissists, well, in my opinion, a couple of narcissists beating each other over the head with their opinion. No one's listening. Is that, that's when we come back to role models. Do we need to have a different framework for our leaders and say, hey, what you're doing here is you're talking about, and we've seen the program here in Australia about respect, yet our leaders are not showing that respect.
Yeah, good point there. I think it's I'm a big believer that I can only control what I can control. So changing something that big, I can certainly have an opinion about it. I mean, I may not necessarily be able to control that. All I can control is who I admire or who I am as a person. Being for fathers, being a role model for children, having particular role models for myself and who I look up to. So that's what I can control. So it all comes back to, for me, that's what, if I can control that and I can be a better person and I can be a role model for others around me, that's what I'm going to focus on. And that's where I put all my energy than looking at something that is so big that or small that I can't control.
Yeah. Well, that's a good philosophy. What you're talking about there is it comes back to self-responsibility, isn't it? You've got the responsibility you can control yourself, and taking that responsibility, you can be a good role model for the people around you.
Yeah.
And if everyone did that, the world would be a little bit different.
That's right. Exactly. Yes.
All right. I know you've got to run soon, but do you want to tell us a little bit about the work that you do and who you work with and how you help people, and how people can reach you if they connect with you, and that way they can get help from the specific work that you do?
Yeah, for sure, Damien. Yeah, so I work with men predominantly. So, and this subject is pretty much exactly what the the work that I've done and do is all about. So started coaching many years ago, and men in particular, to take them from feeling lost or lack of purpose right through to having certainty, clarity, and completeness moving forward. It is a 9-week online course. I do one-on-one, but what I've done is I've taken basically all the work that I've done, all the problems and the wins that men have had that I've coached into the online program, and it's called The Complete Man. So it's going from A to B, feeling lost to having that completeness at the end, and it's a very, very powerful program. So
that sounds awesome. I'd love to do a special on that program, and you can, if you'd like to talk through that and so people know what they're getting. If we can do a bit more detail on that, if you're up for that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to share what it's all about, what they'll get, and because my passion is it comes back to living fully now, Brian. My passion is to for a man to feel special on this earth, to actually want to live. And share who they are and just be comfortable with themselves and who they are. So that's the number one passion that I have in life.
Sounds awesome. I'll get my people to talk to your people who can talk to their people. You and I will touch base after this.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Yeah.
If we're going to wrap it up in a nutshell and define a framework for being manly, how would you do that? How would you put that in a nutshell?
Framework, live life to your values, so what you actually feel is important to you as a person, as a man, not someone else. So hone in on what the true values are, letting go of what's happened in the past, and bringing a huge amount of self-love in.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Paul, it's been so wonderful having you on the show. So much wonderful knowledge here that you've shared. The great work that you're doing. People, if you connect with what Paul's doing, check out his links in the show blurb, and stay tuned. Sounds like we've got a special coming about being a man. It'd be awesome. I'm excited for that one. But Paul, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been great.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.